All right. Hello, nobody. My name's Andy. I am the owner of Twin Cities Berry Company, and this was supposed to be a live stream, but it ended up not working because of technical difficulties. But we're just going to keep plugging ahead and learning about strawberries, even though it's recorded. So, I am the owner of Twin Cities Berry Company, and today we're going to be talking about a 3-year long strawberry project that I've been researching in collaboration with the University of Minnesota and the Department of Agriculture here in Minnesota. So we've been looking at high density strawberry production techniques inside tunnels that are actually affordable for small beginning and emerging farmers to use. So let's get right into it, shall we? What we're going to be doing in this talk, I'm going to give a really quick overview of the Fruit Factory project, sort of the philosophy behind the system. We're going to talk about how 2024 went, and then we're going to get real deep into the weeds on production metrics, labor metrics, and economic projections, which is what I'm sure most people want to learn about. So I'm going to try and blow through the beginning of this talk pretty quickly, just for the recording. So, project overview. The research focus of Twin Cities Berry Company is the realities of climate instability and climate resiliency, and the potential that something called controlled environment agriculture can help in doing that. And that's basically just a blanket, complicated term for greenhouse production. And it could be anything from as huge as to something like what you're seeing right here, multiple acres of greens or strawberries stacked vertically or horizontally, to something as small as just throwing some netting up around an apple tree to control the environment passively from pests or diseases from getting in. So it's a pretty wide gamut here. Um, but this is where most of the research funding is actually going to, is this sort of scale. And that's a problem because as beneficial as CEA can be, when you only research at this level, it sort of prices out the vast majority of beginning and emerging farmers who arguably need that sort of climate resiliency the most. So that's really where TCBC is trying to fill the gap. We want to create climate resilient practices that mimic the Dutch greenhouse systems that cost millions and millions of dollars, but at a price point that's affordable for the small, emerging, and growing farmers like myself. I conduct the research myself. I give out the research myself, and I try to create educational materials myself so that we as a community can grow and become more strong and more resilient from a small farm perspective. So, trying to make things affordable, and I'm trying to prioritize environmental stewardship, specifically in the way that these systems can really reduce your physical agricultural footprint. Sound fun? I hope so. I hope I'm not the only nerd watching this right now. So what we're basically doing here to cut costs as much as we can is we're taking infrastructure that exists on tons of small farms anyways. These things called high tunnels, hoop houses, caterpillar tunnels, these ways of sort of really passively modifying the environment, but then making them look more like those Dutch greenhouse systems. So in addition to growing on the ground, growing on top of gutters, they call it tabletop production, sort of combining the benefits of a tabletop production system with the environmental benefits and the climate resiliency benefits of growing in a high density controlled environment like a tunnel. So this is what it looks like on our farm. We've had 4 of them this past year at Twin Cities Berry Company. And as you can see, we've got multiple rows of stacked gutters on top of each other. And on the inside, it just looks like this. On each gutter, we have containers going 100 feet down with irrigation line following it all the way down the gutter and quarter-inch emitter tubes going into each container. When we grow like this, even without putting any strawberries in the ground, we can get 1,400 plants in a very small 16 by 100 foot space. You can get 2,000 plants if you plant into the ground as well. That would take 7,000 square feet in an open field, but you only need 1,600 square feet if you grow this way. And just by looking at this, if you've picked strawberries before, you can already see the benefit here. It's going to be a lot more efficient. You're not crawling on the ground. The plants are much closer to each other, and you have just a much more efficient system when it comes to maintaining the plants and harvesting them at the same time. And this is a close-up of how beautiful these strawberries can look. Before a tornado hit our farm in 2024, we had over 90% marketability. We'll go into that number before in a couple minutes here, but we have beautiful strawberries, and the percentage of strawberries that look like this in a controlled environment are so high that it's just a very beneficial system, and it contributes to the overall efficiency when you're comparing to an open field control. So let's talk about that, shall we? What we've been doing the past several years is growing inside 4 tunnels and then comparing it to an open field control to see what are the yields like, what is the labor like, what is the management like, and then comparing economic metrics at the end here too. Our 4 tunnels I call C1, C2, C3, and C4, and as you can see here, we have 4 very different yield numbers at the end of the year. The reason why is because we totally rebuilt all of these tunnels this year on brand new farmland that we purchased. So a normal planting season for us takes 6 days. In 2024, it took 7 weeks. So we sort of had a unwilling forced succession planting this year on the farm. And as you can see, the plants that were planted earliest, that C1 tunnel, we had just under 1,500 pounds of fruit, whereas C4, we had just under 750. So about half the yield by delaying planting by 7 weeks. This OF here on the right was from our open field control. We got 0 yield out of it this year because of that tornado and a lot of fungal and disease pressure and pest pressure as well. However, in order to make up for that comparison, we were able to leverage our relationship with the University of Minnesota and get a lot of their open field strawberry data to compare this against as well. So thank you so much for the U of M for giving that over to us. Now, when we compare marketability, you can see the difference here. Our average marketability, and this is with a tornado hitting the farm in September, we were anywhere from 74 to just under 80% marketability in our tunnels. Compared to the open field, where no tornado hit at the university, it was 52% marketability. And I will say that before the tornado hit our farm, it was over 90% marketability of our yield. So essentially everything that we picked was able to go to market as whole fruit. And the grade B stuff, as a business, we were able to leverage that into value-added products. So we made more money off of the grade B, but we'll get into that in the economic projections in a couple minutes here. So very favorable marketability in the tunnels compared to the open field. If we want to control for plot size and just look at yield per plant, when you plant at the correct time in C1 here, this is what we really want to be looking at. You can get over a pound of strawberries for every plant that you put into a fruit factory. That is over 20% higher than what the University of Minnesota was able to get from their raw yields. And if you look at marketability, it's even better. We were able to get 0.85 pounds of marketable yield from every plant in C1 when you plant at the correct time, compared to just 0.41 in the open field at the University of Minnesota. So the marketability in an open field takes such a hit compared to the protected culture that we've built here that we essentially got the same marketable yield in a fruit factory that we planted 7 weeks late compared to the open field controls that they had over at the University of Minnesota. So pretty interesting stuff. Let's go into labor really quick, because every farmer needs to know about that. So for C1, plant at the right time, total labor spread out over about 21 weeks. We had 130-ish hours of total labor. So not a whole lot when you think about that whole labor spread. And it's because the maintenance time inside these tunnels is lower because there's almost no harvest. I mean, there's almost no weeding. And because the harvest is at waist level and shoulder level, you're able to harvest more quickly per plant compared to when you're crawling in the ground. So as you can see here, the tunnels where we had higher yields, we all had higher harvest labor, makes sense. And the maintenance labor was actually pretty similar amongst all of the tunnels. So even if you plant earlier, it doesn't add a whole lot to the total maintenance labor, which is good to know. If we want to look at labor per plant, control for plot size, we're looking at 5.5 minutes of labor for every plant in that tunnel, compared to the open field at the University of Minnesota. They had just over 6. So it was still more efficient. In this graph, a lower number will be better because you want less labor for every single plant. The cool thing here, though, is when you combine the yield and the labor together, then you're able to create what I'm calling the yield labor index, or the number of minutes in for every pound of fruit that you get out. So you want a lower number here as well. So if we look at total yield, what this graph is showing here is that inside our tunnels, we were able to get about a pound of fruit out for every 5 to 6 minutes of labor that we put into it. Compared to the open field control at the university, it was 7.62. Now that's for total yield. Remember, the marketability was very low for the open field treatments. So if we control for that, the numbers look even better for the fruit factories. We have about 6.5 minutes in for every pound of fruit, of grade A fruit that we got out. At the University of Minnesota, it took them about 15 minutes of labor for every single grade A pound that they got out of the open field. So it was over 2 times more efficient inside the fruit factories that were planted at the right time compared to a similar strawberry system, except it was grown in the open field. So things are looking very high yield. They're looking very efficient. They're looking great. So let's talk about economics now. This is probably the most important part that farmers are worried about in addition to yields. And I think the cool thing about our business is that when I'm giving you these revenues and when I'm giving you these costs, they're not based on statistical models that I drew up in a projection software. They are not estimates. They are not ranges. They are not based on assumptions. This is what I did. This is how much I paid, and this is how much I sold these fruits for, because we're not just a research facility, we're a production facility too. And so the fact that we're able to actually give real world sales numbers, I think helps with recommendations to farmers in the greater Minnesota area. So just a little senseless plug for TCBC right there. Now let's talk about some rough news. The cost of installing a fruit factory in 2025 has gone up considerably, even from when I started this project in 2022. So when I started, the cost of all of this stuff here in this spreadsheet, just under $10,000. Now, $15,468 to get totally up and running. So buying your tunnel, buying your gutter, buying the support posts, getting all of your potting mix and your plants and your fertilizer, all that stuff. It's never going to be as cheap as growing in the open field. It just won't. That's not the purpose of this system. The purpose is to make the benefits of high density production that's millions of dollars usually, sometimes, as cheap as hundreds of thousands, still totally inaccessible. Like presenting it at a number that, while not inexpensive, can actually be saved up for and possibly obtained by small farmers at some point. And maybe you won't be able to do it in year 1. Maybe the first year you just buy the tunnel. And then in the second year, you put in the gutters. Or hopefully you already own a tunnel, so it's not going to be nearly this expensive. Or if instead of buying your gutters from Canada, like I do, you're able to go to Menards and build it yourself for a lot cheaper. There's plenty of opportunities to make that $15,000 quote cheaper. But that being said, if you do the exact same thing that I did, the good news is that's just the year 1 costs, and essentially 80% of that is a cost you're never going to have to make again. So most of that is infrastructure and permanent items that will last the life of the fruit factory system. Just over 20% of that is going to be your labor, 17%, and then that's labor at a $20 an hour rate, and your consumables at a 4.3%, or about $650. So while our year 1 costs are going to be super high, from year 2 onwards, it's actually just $3,704 for every tunnel. So if you spread that out over 5 years, that means 1 tunnel total cost is going to be around $30,000 to keep a fruit factory running for 5 years. And that includes labor. That includes paying yourself. So seems like a lot. Let's talk about revenue. Once again, these aren't based off of projections. This is based off of what I sell at and sell successfully at markets. We've never not sold out of these strawberries at a market. Every single berry that we picked in this project was sold and made its way into a consumer's home, which I think is pretty cool. So let's talk about yields. Let's say you don't have a tornado hit your farm and you plant at the right time. You can get around 1.1, maybe even a little bit more yield per plant in the fruit factory system. With 1,400 plants, you can get up to 2,000 plants if you plant into the ground. But if you only do the containers like we did, that'll mean 1,386 pounds of grade A, 154 pounds of grade B. We sell at $11 a pound because you have the high quality premium and you also have the off-season premium because these are day neutral berries that are available at a time that almost no one else has them. And you're at markets, if you're going direct to consumer the way that we do, people just have a higher willingness to pay for super fresh fruit that was picked, less than 24 hours ago. Another really nice thing is a grade B fruit. Because we have a cottage food business, we're able to make jams and syrups and fruit leather and sell that. And we actually generate more revenue per pound of fruit from our grade B than we do from our grade A. But if we combine the $11 for the grade A and the 21 average from our grade B, we get $18,480 per year from one fruit factory that takes up 1,600 square feet at $11.55 per square foot inside a tunnel. $11.55, is that good? I didn't know. So I did a little bit of research. I did a little bit of digging. I found this really interesting peer-reviewed publication where a lot of growers in Indiana were surveyed who grow in high tunnels. And this type 1 here, these are farms where high tunnels and tunnel production is the center of their business. They were able to get in a non-fruit factory, just a normal tunnel where you grow inside the ground, an average of $5.18 per square foot. Whereas the fruit factory, we averaged $11.55 per square foot. So we were able to get over 2 times the revenue. That's good news. It means that all of that infrastructure that you put in actually generates a premium in revenue compared to if you just left it as a caterpillar tunnel. I've also discussed these numbers with Eric Highmark, who currently works at Renewing the Countryside and has taught high tunnel classes before. He's told me that a lot of his growers will range anywhere from $3 to $6 per square foot inside their protected cultures, inside their hoop houses. So both anecdotally and measurably, we have a system here that is much higher revenue than the average. So 5-year profit projection. That first year cost is very high. Great news, because the revenues are going to be so high as well, you're able to pay for the entire fruit factory in year 1. I sound like I'm doing an infomercial here, but it's just because I'm so excited about the system. So not only are you able to pay for that whole fruit factory in the first year, we actually had a little bit of gross profit left over, minus the packaging, in year 1. And then in year 2, when you're not rebuying the tunnel every single year, we were able to get over $14,000 in profit per tunnel per year. And remember, that includes labor. That includes paying yourself and your employees $20 an hour. So from the profit generated from fruit factories, you could purchase more fruit factories. And that's what I've been doing. I have 5 of them now. But if we want to average this out over 5 years, we get just under $40 of gross profit per square foot inside a fruit factory. And this is just showing the same data, but as a graph. So we have a little bit of gross profit in year 1, but it grows to over $62,000 of profit on a 1,600 square foot space over the course of 5 years. So pretty compelling stuff. I'm really impressed with the numbers we were able to get in this economic analysis. So let's zoom out a tiny bit and say, I want to do multiple fruit factories. Let's say you put 5 fruit factories, you have 6 feet of walkways in between them, kind of like what we have here. You see, we've got these little walkways of clover in between. You could probably squeeze them a little bit closer together, but I liked the way that they looked kind of spaced out. But you can fit 5 fruit factories on just a quarter of an acre. And if you do that, if you plant at the right time, you're able to generate just under $100,000. So you're able to get six-figure income almost on a quarter acre of land and just under $500,000 in 5 years. And these projections are based on a experiment where a tornado hit the farm in the middle of peak harvest season. So the good news is it's possible that these numbers could even be higher, but I wanted to be conservative here and do it based on reality because severe weather events can occur, and they did occur. So I wasn't going to rule those out of our analyses and rule them out of our projections. But all in all, I'm really thankful for the opportunity to do this sort of work. And I think that the next step, now that we've established the viability of the fruit factory as a proof of concept, something that could be built for a not totally unreasonable amount of money and can become economically sustainable fairly quickly on small farms. Now we need to focus in transitioning towards education. So let's make educational materials teaching people how to actually do it this way. That's our next step. That's where I'm hoping to get funding for. And that's what I'm hoping you all will follow along with me on this journey. So thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks, University of Minnesota. Thank you to the Department of Agriculture for their support through the years and helping me bring this project to life. So thanks a lot and see you around.